Hi everyone, my name is Don from Mayleaf in London. I am here with Master Anita Mason, and we are sharing tea, having a chat, and we've got some interesting teas that we can talk about. So this is more about your students, is that right?
This, I'm a novice at this particular tea, and I'll let you introduce it in a minute, but at the UK College we basically, we obviously have different courses. We have the mindfulness courses, we have the Golden Ball, which is about aging harmoniously, but there's a big 6-month course that really invites the student to look after themselves, to take time out, to look at any issues, and we start with cultivation. So what are we cultivating? Well, acquired states, so things like frustration, anger, and basically if we can clean ourselves of these acquired states, our virtues shine. But we can do the cultivation through Qigong, we can do it through food, we can also do it through, if you want to go that level, prayer and meditation. But again, what's happening more and more is we're hearing that you can also cultivate through tea making and tea drinking. And this is where really I'd love to ask you again what you recommend, because again, when I train with my master, he brings in these wonderful teas and says, here, hold this, and they're the same tea, but one's been blessed, and it just takes you to a whole new realm. So I get that there's an energetic quality to this, and he nearly always uses, I'm going to call it PuErrh, but I don't know the correct...
PuErrh, yeah.
And what, you know, as a student, as a novice, what do they buy? Is it the cooked? Is it... There's different PuErrhs, there's different costs involved in that. But the whole, to me, it's the whole cultivation, energy of it, and it's very sacred. And I just thought, I've got to tell you this. When I met him the last time, he was talking about when he went to China to buy his PuErrh, and he said that he walked into a room and it was full of these, they're like big cakes, aren't they?
Yeah, they're tongs, so they have cakes and then they stack them up.
And what were they doing?
They were 24/7 playing Daoist chanting. Yeah.
I can't believe
in
that.
the whole. It wasn't a warehouse, but it was a fairly big-sized room. But yeah, it was all Daoist chanting, 24/7.
Do you ever have field trips?
We're thinking of organising some. We are thinking of organising some. Yeah. But you're right to say PuErrh is a whole. It's almost like a subset of tea. So you've got tea, you've got all the different types, and PuErrh as a type is like a whole other world that you can dive into. There are so many different varieties, there are so many different ages, there's so many different processes.
It seems quite specialised.
It's specialised, but at its heart, it's actually very simple. And it really comes from the people who really made this tea famous, which is the mountain people of China. So the mountain people of China around the Yunnan area, they really have such a great reverence for their tea forests, and they are forests. They're not plantations. They're not, they are forests. The good ones, at least. There are now plantations being cultivated, of course, to meet demand, but really, these old arbor forests where you've got trees that are anywhere up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 years old.
Oh goodness!
So these ancient trees that within itself, and I'm somebody who just I think that we all underestimate the power of trees in general. But these ancient forests, you get obviously amazing PuErrh from 50-year-old plants, but the point is that the reverence that they have for these forests, and then the way that they process the leaf is very much handmade. It's very much almost rough the way they make it. They allow the leaf itself to essentially take on its own character rather than controlling the character. So it's a different mentality. and therefore you get so much diversity, and that's where the tea lovers dive in. Yeah.
Okay. So if my students were to use this to help with their cultivation, what would you recommend? Where would they start? Because there's raw, there's cooked. I'm a novice.
Well, let's talk about the differences. So we've got here some raw pu'errh and some cooked ripe, or they call it. So this is sheng and this is shou. Okay. That's the Chinese way of saying it. The translations are cooked, ripe.
Wow.
But essentially, they are very different teas, and they shouldn't really be thrown under the same heading. This one here is basically, in its essence, it's a green tea. But what they've done with the leaf is they haven't processed the leaf, over-processed the leaf like they do with green tea, where they heat it up and they control it and they fix it. What they want to do is basically leave it to allow it to continue to change and mature. So they will only sun dry the tea, for example.
Right.
They won't machine dry the tea.
Right.
They will pan fry the tea, but they'll pan fry it at a lower temperature. So it's all about maintaining the microorganisms on the leaf, the enzymatic action that is happening within the leaf. You don't want to deactivate the enzymes.
Okay.
So therefore it's reacting to the environment and continuously changing. And that's what makes raw pu'errh suitable for aging, because you have very young raw pu'errh, and then you've got 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 40-year age, and the price radically increases. So that's what raw pu'errh in a nutshell is.
Okay.
For cooked or ripe pu'errh, what they are doing is they are fermenting the tea.
Right.
And oxidizing it, but essentially what they're doing is they're taking the leaf and they are piling it up in a large warehouse with usually with floor which is drainable, so it drains the floor. So they cover it. They put about 30% water over it. They crank up the heat. And what happens is the microorganisms on the leaf, but also seeded within the floor, because they produce lots and lots of pu'errh in this factory, starts to ferment the actual leaf.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I mean, it sounds a bit, it doesn't sound very palatable, but in essence it's a kind of composting process. And therefore you can get really well made and really badly made, right? Because if you get the wrong type of bacteria or the wrong types of fungal activity in that fermentation process, you can get radically funky flavors, right? So it's about the skill of the producer to make sure that the fermentation is done right. So even though it's all kind of thrown under the word, the type of pu'errh, in fact, they're very, very different types of tea.
And what would you say the difference energetically is? Would you know?
Yeah, I mean, energetically, the raw pu'errh, when it's young, is quite energizing. It's quite an energizing tea. A lot of people like it because it gives them a slightly kind of altered state, kind of giddiness, happiness, a giggliness, but it's quite effervescent. It's kind of overflowing. As it ages, it mellows. As it ages, it becomes, I guess you could kind of take the analogy of vodka and whiskey, if you wanted to, you know, where the kind of effect, the feeling is a little bit more rounded out, it's a little bit more calm, it's a little bit more introspective, it's different. The cooked pu'errh tea, or the ripe pu'errh tea, generally has a calmer feel to it. And so, but you know, it's a very black and white thing, and people aren't black and white. So we get people that react very strongly to raw pu'errh, and some people that have a very different, very calming experience. So it's you know, you can't put.
I think the one I've usually had is this.
Yeah.
And it does make me feel almost like a sedative. Really quite mellow. Actually quite centered. Very focused.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I haven't had any of this, so
it's a very radically different. It's a very radically different taste. It's a radically different effect as well. But you're right to say that definitely the fermented tea just has a little bit more of a kind of calmer feel to it. So which one would you like to try?
Is there a difference in price?
Yes.
Because that's had more work, more energy, more
Actually,
cultivation.
in general, this is more expensive.
Right. That surprises me.
Well, so there's a few different reasons for that.
Yeah.
We could go into the whole, logistics of how you make the tea. This is obviously work intensive, and getting it right is hard. So it can command quite a high price. However, the really ancient tea trees, the 200, 300, 400, 500-year-old tea trees, those leaves tend to be reserved for raw.
Right.
Because there's more of because it's so natural, there's less actually effect that's being producer made, if you understand what I mean. This is, the skill of the producer is much more a factor here. But this one, if you really want to show off the nuances of different mountains, different areas of the same mountain, then this is where you would reserve your top pickings of the ancient tea trees.
Okay.
So yeah, usually this is the more expensive.
I think as I've already tried this, we'll go for that.
Okay. Good
If
choice.
I may.
Good choice, absolutely.
And look at this. You see, this is, look.
Yeah, would you like, should we show this to the camera? We'll show this to the camera.
This is amazing. This is amazing. And I definitely know all my students will want one of these.
So this is handmade. It's a fully handmade Chaozhou clay pot. I mean, it is amazing when you think that no machines were used in the making of that.
Totally handmade by a master.
And actually, when you get a few of them together, you'll notice the lids don't fit on them. If you ever make the mistake of taking the lid off, you have to find the one that the lid fits on. It's all handmade. It's by master in Chaozhou. And it's not just obviously the aesthetics, which are incredible, but it's also...
You can feel the energy in them.
Yeah, you can really, and you can see even the finger marks.
Yeah.
You can see the hand working of it.
Unbelievable. And you sell these here?
We do, very small quantities, because obviously they're made by hand for us. So we only get maybe 20 in at a time, but they are...
That is unbelievable.
They're very special. And the clay in itself has an effect on the tea. So the clay helps to soften out astringency in the tea. So the mineral content of clay, and you may have heard of Yixing clay before, which is very, very famous. Yeah. Very, very difficult to get hold of Yixing clay these days because most of it has been used.
Right.
But the minerality within the clay means that when you brew, it helps to there's an interaction that happens that basically softens out some of the astringency. Okay, so what we're going to do...
And you have these for life, don't you? They become your...
Oh yes, they become heirlooms. And they develop, if you pour the tea wash, and I'll show you what I mean, over them, they start to develop a shine, and they change over time. So they reveal your tea drinking progress. So we're just going to warm it up. And then, I hope you don't mind, I don't have a
Definitely
scoop
one
here.
for the Santa list.
Yes.
I just know they're all going to want one of these.
So you can see how you basically, with these small pots, you want to basically, especially with these large strip leaves, you want to basically fill it up.
Okay.
Okay. If you were having something that was like a cut leaf or something that was smaller, then you might only put it up to about half or a third. But with these pu'errhs, we want to fill it up. So we're going to fill that up, and then you can actually just have a sniff of those. So just the warm pot now is going to be releasing a lot of different aromatics, which is very different from your cooked pu'errh.
Oh wow. It feels very open.
Open, yeah. It's, for me, pu'errh, especially raw pu'errh, is the most, we talk a lot about terroir in tea, and in wine and in all of those natural products, but for me raw pu'errh is the best at showing off terroir. It really shows off, you really get to taste the mountain, you get to taste where it's been grown. And that's why people delight in it, because you can really start to taste the difference within the same mountain region, just slightly different sides of the mountain. You can taste it really, really clearly with raw pu'errh. So when we're doing a tasting, or when we're doing any kind of tea ceremony, although I don't really like that word because it makes you feel like it's not part of your day-to-day, right? You can do this day-to-day. There's a whole process, there's lots of different steps. We're kind of going through them a little bit fast, but have a smell of the wet leaves. So you'll see that it smells quite radically different, or at least a different expression of the tea.
Much stronger, not as subtle.
Yeah, much stronger. Yeah. So now we're gonna pour. Put the lid on. I'm just gonna pour some water over the top, just to maintain the temperature, because you want with pu'errh tea, especially raw pu'errhs like this, you want to have quite a high temperature and consistently high temperature. That's the other advantage of clay. It retains heat a lot more than porcelain or glass. So we rinse the tea. That does a few different things. First of all, it takes away any potential tea dust that's within the tea, so you want to clear that away. You can see it kept on the filter. It also means that you get to smell the tea leaves and experience that before you drink it. And it also just means that your steeping times can be reduced. So when you initially, if you were going to brew direct from dry, then basically it's going to take longer.
Right.
And as you increase time, you increase the astringency of the tea. So the whole idea of these tiny pots is it kind of feels to some people who are not kind of been involved in gong fu brewing, which is what this style is. It seemed like these are really, really small pots and ridiculous, but it's all about maximizing the flavor from the leaf, and drinking in small quantities. Here you go. So your first taste of some raw pu'errh. This is a gushu, so this is from old tea trees.
Thank you. And what was that thing that you did last time I was here, where you knocked on the table?
Oh, yeah.
What was that about?
So when you...
Because you've just poured me a cup.
Yeah, when somebody pours a cup of tea, it is very polite to just very casually knock or tap on the table. It doesn't have to be, a lot of people when they learn this, they kind of, you don't have to make it too showy. It's a very relaxed thing, but it comes from the Qing dynasty. Emperor Qianlong, an emperor who was quite different from other emperors in China in that he actually wanted to go and venture outside the Forbidden City to actually see how his people were living. He asked for his servants to take him out on field trips, but not to reveal his identity as the emperor. And so one of his field trips, the legend has it that he served one of his servants tea. Obviously the servant was humbled by this and wanted to kowtow and say thank you and bow, but couldn't do so. And so the story goes that the servant mimicked the bow with his fingers. And so this developed into a little tap. But as I said, just keep it casual. It doesn't have to be, I tell this to some people and I see them going, on the table. Anyway, have a taste.
Thank you very much.
See what you think. It's going to be very different, a big departure from cooked pu'errh. Breathe out through your nose. That always helps to increase the level of flavour.
It's very different to the...
It is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is.
So it's remarkable, isn't it, that the same leaves from the same mountains can produce, all right, they are slightly different pickings, but essentially the same tea trees can make completely different types of tea. And this is the natural version in the sense of completely, raw.
I think I prefer it. Mind you, I didn't address my tea like that, so maybe I should. But,
it's
totally different.
It's totally different. So what you have with raw pu'errh is you have much more of the terroir. So when I breathe out through my nose, I can sense things like the plants that were growing around it. So I can sense kind of jasmine and orchid. I can taste the kind of humidity of the forest. I can, you kind of, it's much more of a journey. You feel like you're traveling and you're there. Whereas with cooked pu'errh, you taste a very strong tea, which is rich and cavernous, and you know, has those kind of cellar-like qualities and those kind of earthy qualities and foresty qualities, but it feels much more affected.
Yeah.
Right? This feels much more, I've picked the leaf and I'm
I think now that I've tasted the two, I probably would recommend a student starts with this one.
Okay.
It might be my personal preference, but there's a quality that it's quite mellow.
Mm-hmm. In the sense of its flavour, and it's obviously opening up, in the sense that its flavour is quite, yeah, I understand what you mean. It's obviously lighter in terms of taste.
Yeah.
Or not lighter in terms of taste, but lighter in terms of the richness of the colour and the weightiness of this tea. But obviously the only thing that you need to be aware of is this is really potent tea. So the tribal people, the mountain people that we're talking about, these are not the Han Chinese. These are mountain people that you know, these are Ulang tribe, Dai tribe. These are this very tribal tea. This, and they use this they use this to really affect themselves, give themselves energy, and it can bring heat, and people find that they can really, it's very empowering. So you know, it depends on what effect you would like to achieve. You can see, just looking at the liquor, if you take a look at these bubbles here, can you see how thick and viscous the tea is? And that's the richness of old tea trees.
Hence why it's used for cultivation.
Yeah.
But I love the history you get with it as well, because I mean, we are in the field of energy, and I believe that the trees and the leaves have the energy, and if it's from a different place, then all that affects the tea. And I just love that. It's not just because when we give this to students in college, we just say just take your time with it. It's not like a Thai food tea where you just gulp it down. It's precious. It's sacred. Just really enjoy being in that moment.
Absolutely. It's about being in the moment and enjoying the tea, whether or not being solitary or socially. And it isn't commodity tea. I mean, there's a big difference between producing, you know, hundreds of tons of tea to satisfy a certain market versus producing, I think we only managed to get 50 kilos of this tea. Okay. So I mean, it's a small batch, you know, because obviously these ancient tea trees, there aren't that many around. So you know, you have to appreciate that level of rarity in it.
I love the fact as well that it seems as though it's honoured. Those people honour this. It's
look, this is the area.
Is it really?
Yeah. So you know, you can see it's a family affair here. I don't know if the camera can see it, but there's a little girl. You can see down here. This is them picking, and you can see that, you know, they're all.
It's a life, isn't it?
It's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life. And fundamentally, when you talk about cultivation, I think that when you have a precious tea, when you have tea which has this love that's been imbued into it, it's been made by hand, by people. You can feel it. You can feel it, and it also draws your attention to it more than if you're having commodity tea. It draws your attention to it more, and especially if you drink it within this format, because there's so many aesthetics within this, right? There are so many metaphors which unconsciously you absorb. So the metaphor of, you know, nature, of you actually traveling back to the field, right? That you have, in an urban environment, you have something which is you know, bringing you directly back to a mountainside in China and tasting it. incredible in terms of its metaphor about bringing you back to nature, but also the concepts of brewing itself. That it requires your thought, that it requires a certain thought that then gets transferred over time to instinct, where you get to know the tea and you start to have almost a conversation with the tea in the brewing process. Then you have all of the kind of metaphors of, you know, the leaf giving up its flavour and then over time it fading, and, you know, this kind of, you know, this metaphor for transience, which is really fundamental. So it's funny how brewing tea may seem like such an everyday thing, but aesthetically and metaphorically, consciously or unconsciously, it's bringing you back to truth in a really interesting way, I think.
We say one thing which this just absolutely personifies. When everybody, because not many people have heard about medical qigong, and that's not really why we're doing the videos, because anybody can just give me a ring and I'll gladly explain more about that. But in Chinese medicine, especially the energetics of Chinese medicine, there was a Chinese doctor that actually said medicine was intent, and I just love that. So you've got the guys in the field, you can tell that it's loved. Just the focus that you've done on there had intent behind it, and as the drinker,
absolutely
intent.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
And I just
and probably
love that.
Very
about
underword
Chinese
used in health and in life is intention, because that is
beautiful, isn't it?
It's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you have intention, then in essence you are making a conscious choice in your mind training to say, this is why I'm doing this. And hopefully you're choosing reasons that are based on love versus fear. But if you're unconscious of it, then you tend to, there is a tendency to resort back to choices related to fear, you know. And so, you know, it's definitely a positive
I just love that
approach to living. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying your first attempt at raw pu'errh.
It's this that's got me, I'm afraid. This beautiful, beautiful piece of art.
It is something special. And thankfully he's masters training his sons. So, you know, hopefully the tradition will continue.
I could go on vacation then, if he was an apprentice.
I spoke to Master Wu about how long it took him to reach the stage where he would claim to be a master. And it was, I can't remember, but it was something in the region of 20 years of work. He looks quite young for his age.
Does he?
Yeah, he does.
He seems an incredible guy.
Very, very much so. Very proud of his work.
So thank you very much for
no problem.
For your time, because I know you're a really busy guy. But as I say, I love your energy. I love how enthusiastic you are, and it's actually nice to get somebody that knows what they're talking about as well in this. So I'm very confident that if any patients or general public or students just want to give you a ring, come down, that they'll be well informed and they're getting something genuine.
That's for sure, and we're all learning.
Yeah.
You know, and the whole point is, you know, the whole point is to just learn and transfer. So that's all we try to do. We try to absorb as much as we can from the tea fields and then pass that on, and then hopefully, just like you, create more teachers.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Enjoyed that.
Cheers.
And you.